الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. صدق الله العظيم وبلغ رسوله الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين الشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this glorious day of Al-Jum'ah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to come closer to Him and to seek refuge in Him. And we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allowed us to see this day in the state of Iman. Had we not had Allah or His Messenger, had we not known or had the privilege of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then this day would not mean for us what it means for us. And it would not hold for us what it holds for us. So we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of Islam. And one of the things that you'll find the majority of Muslims, including myself, that we face as a struggle or as a challenge in our life is to find the balance between what our deen wants from us and what we have as responsibilities and duties within our dunya. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he educated and taught and inspired and mentored his Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught them in a way that their deen became their dunya and their dunya was their deen. The two were no longer exclusive from one another, meaning their daily lives served as a reminder for their religion and their religion taught them how to live in their daily lives. And the Prophet ﷺ did this in many ways. And one of the ways he did that was that he would take something that was maybe mundane or routine or average or practical or something that you would see on an everyday basis, and he would compare it and he would allow them to reflect upon it in the light of the religion. For example, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were once sitting around and they saw a woman and she was worried and she was running around, she was very, very anxious. And she kept picking up children, looking at them, putting them back down, kept picking up a child, looking at it, putting it back down. And later on they realized that she had lost her son. So she finally found her son and she held her son very, very close to her chest. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were looking at this, they're observing this woman. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam notices them observing this woman. And he says to them, would you ever expect that this woman would throw her son into a fire? Do you think that would this ever come as a comprehension? Would this ever make sense to you? That this woman who loves her child so much, who's so happy and relieved to have found her child, would she ever throw her child into a fire? And the Sahaba said, no, Ya Rasulullah, she would never do something like that. We can see with our eyes, right in front of us, she loves him so much. And the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah loves His slaves and His servants more than this woman loves her child. So the Nabi ﷺ took a typical, practical, natural response that the Sahaba saw in their daily lives, and He allowed it to be a point of reflection for them in their deen. And similarly, earlier this week, I was given the opportunity to reflect upon something similar, and I'd like to share that with you. You know, throughout, and as long as I've been working, I've usually been somebody who works later in the night. Right? Anytime I had a job or a part-time job, there was always night shifts, evening shifts, afternoons, and I would always think that this is the best shift to be on, because I get to sleep in late in the morning, and I get to have a good breakfast before I go to work. And just earlier this week, the supervisor called me and he said, "You're working in the morning. You're working from 8 a.m. in the morning." And I thought, man, this is going to be tough for me. This is going to be difficult. I can't go back to sleep after Fajr. I'm going to maybe just grab coffee for breakfast. You know, it's going to be a hard challenge for me. So I went to work at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I came back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which was usually when I would leave for work. And I realized that now I had the entire day to do whatever I wanted. I could see my friends, I could see my family, I could have dinner, I could watch the news, I could do whatever I wanted because I finished my work much earlier. Similarly in the dunya, and in terms of our akhirah, you and I are put in a similar situation. It caused me to reflect upon this. You and I are given the opportunity to work just a little bit in the dunya right now. And then we'll have all of the akhirah, eternity upon eternity to enjoy. But you and I sacrifice that eternal enjoyment, that eternal bliss, just for a few small things. With myself, I noticed the only thing that I got from working later at night was I got to sleep in a little longer. That's all that I had. And I sacrificed the ability to spend time with my family, the ability to see my friends and enjoy the day and do whatever I wanted, just so I could sleep in a little bit longer. And you and I do this on a day-to-day basis, where we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us, work just a little bit in this dunya. Work early, work long in the dunya. And it's only maybe 40 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 60 years. And after that, you have the eternity to enjoy in Jannatul Firdaus. But you and I, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He'll sell the eternal enjoyment for a temporary enjoyment. And He says in the Quran, what an injustice they've done with themselves. How unjust they've been with themselves. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we look into the Quran, He describes for us the bliss of Jannah. And I take it as a challenge for you. Think of anything that you enjoy in the dunya, and just read Surah Al-Insan. Read Surah Al-Taha. Surah Al-Insan Al-Taha, it has 2 names. Read that surah, and tell me if anything you could think of to enjoy in the dunya is comparative to what Allah puts in that surah. It's a short surah, but the entire surah is spent where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Jannah for the believers. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala at the beginning of the surah lists just a few attributes. You know, they are amongst those who pray, they are amongst those who fasted, they gave charity for the sake of Allah. That's it, a few ayahs at the beginning, and the rest of the surah is spent describing Jannah. It's as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to tell us that to struggle and to strive for Jannah is a very temporary struggle. The work of the dunya, the challenges of being on the deen within the dunya is very, very small. It's nothing but a few ayahs. And then you have the entire surah that just is spent solely to describe Jannatul Firdaus. So one thing that we can do and we can reflect on and we can serve as a reminder and as a challenge for ourselves is to take the time and the effort. Can we honestly say that we are making an honest effort towards our Jannah? Or are we amongst those who are just lackadaisical in our dunya? Are we amongst those who are just breezing, just floating through our dunya? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran that do you believe, do you think that I will give you Jannah and you've done nothing for it? Do you think that I will give you paradise and you haven't struggled for it? وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. People before you had to struggle for Jannah. So you'll have to struggle for Jannah. And if we can put it into a tangible thing, what can we do as a tangible thing to work towards our Jannah? Because it sounds nice, right? It's easy to say, I'm going to start working towards Jannah. I'm going to be a good Muslim. It is very subjective. You can pray today and walk out and think, what can I do? The khutbah will leave your mind, it will leave, and we'll go right back to regular life. One thing that we can take away, and what I have been able to benefit from, one of the golden advices that my teacher gave me, was focus on the basics and then work yourself up from there. A lot of the times, we'll find that we're lacking in our basics of Islam. And then we're trying to achieve a greater level or a greater status or engage in the nawafil. And it's being difficult for us. It's very difficult for us because we're not having our basics as strong as they need to be. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in a hadith Qudsi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam relates that Allah has said that my slave comes close to me with nothing that I love more than the basic obligations, the compulsory actions that I've made an obligation for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He describes His love for the servant, He begins here. He says the basic obligation that a person does. This is what begins the love of Allah for an individual. And Allah continues, and He says, my slave then comes close to me with nothing more that I love than the nawafil actions, than the extra or the optional things, such that I become the hands that He strikes with, the feet that He walks with, and the eyes that He sees with. And if He asks me for anything at that point, I will give it to Him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this hadith Qudsi, He's laid out a step-by-step, if you want to say a formula or a process of how you and I can become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Start off with your basics. It might sound elementary, it might sound, almost passive. I pray, I fast, what do you mean my basics? But strengthen them. If you pray your salah, that's great, but make sure you have khushu' in your salah. If you fast during Ramadan, that's great, but make sure you're earning something and you're gaining something more than just hunger and thirst from your fast. If you give your zakat, do it with a strong intention that this money will go and help somebody. Strengthen the basics. And you'll find that it will become easier and easier. And once those basics are strong, what does Allah say? That my slave becomes closer to me. You're already close to Allah at that point. When you become even closer to me. Why does Allah use that word? Because when we strengthen our basics, we're already close to Allah at that point. You've already begun the journey. You've already taken the first step. You've put in your application for Jannah. Now it's just you're moving on to the next step. My slave becomes closer to me with nothing more that I love than the nawafil. And once our basics become strong, then the nawafil become enjoyable. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that in Surah Al-Nahl says that the ones who believe and they do good works, لَنُحْيِيَنَّهُمْ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً, will allow them to live a very pure, a beautiful life. لَنُحْيِيَنَّهُمْ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. They live a great life. The ones who believe, the ones who do good works, they live an amazing life. Why is that? Because like I said at the beginning, their deen becomes their dunya. It's not a matter of my deen and my dunya. My deen is my dunya. And my deen teaches me how to live in my dunya. And my dunya, the way we saw that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did, it serves as a reflection for my deen. My dunya begins to serve as a reflection for my deen. You go to work, you go to your home, you spend time with your family, you're out with your friends, things that are common for every single person. But once we have the strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our deen, then our dunya will start to become a reflection, will start to become a reminder of our iman. And in this way, my brothers and my sisters, understand this. It's not tomorrow. It's not next week. It's not next Jummah. This process needs to begin now. Because you and I have not been promised tomorrow, or the next minute, or the next hour, or even the next second. But we've been given right now. And the least that we can do sitting here right now is make a strong intention to Allah. And Allah hears when we whisper quietly to ourselves in our hearts that, oh Allah, I might not know exactly what I need to do. I might not have all the knowledge that I need. I might not even be the greatest of people. But right now, Ya Allah, and I want you to make this intention in your heart. Right now, Ya Allah, I'm taking that first step. I'm going to work the morning shift, as I said at the beginning. I'm going to get up early. And I'm going to put in work right now so that I can be given what you promised me for all of eternity. And understand that, my brothers and my sisters, it's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if you do the basics, you do what is needed of you as a good Muslim, you've been promised Jannah. You can stand on the Day of Judgment and hold nothing in front of you but the fact that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, and the Quran has said, that those who have believed and those who have done good work and they live upon that are promised Jannah. And maybe my words don't hold any amount, and they don't. My words are the words of a man. Your words are the words of a man. The words of any scholar or imam is the words of a man. But the word of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the word of Allah, that's what's going to give us. That's going to be something that we can hold on to the Day of Judgment. So fulfill your end of the deal. Be a good person. Believe in Allah and work hard in this dunya. Work hard in this dunya, so that you can be amongst those who are eligible for the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to live a great life, a beautiful life, a pure life of a Muslim, and to die upon the life of a Muslim, and to be resurrected amongst the Muslims. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He gathers us here every single Jum'ah, that He gathers us together in Jannah al-Firdaus. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين ودمر أعداء الدين. اللهم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اللهم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا وأخواتنا في كل مكان وفي كل زمان. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون وأقيموا الصلاة.